A single mother accepts a job caring for the billionaire's troubled triplets, unaware of the tragedy that haunts their mansion. The bond she forms with the children unearths buried secrets and dangerous threats. Just when everything seems to fall apart, the love between her and the billionaire proves stronger than fate. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. More stories coming up. The imposing iron gates of the Burton estate parted with mechanical precision as Sarah Muller's 10-year-old Toyota crawled up the immaculate driveway. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Her weathered car against the backdrop of New England opulence, a sprawling colonial mansion nestled among perfectly manicured gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly across the Massachusetts countryside. Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing with the same thought that had haunted her since accepting this position. What am I getting myself into? At 34, with premature worry lines etched into her face and resilience etched into her soul, she was no stranger to difficult choices. But this one felt different, more significant. The enormity of the estate only amplified her doubts. "We're here, Laura," she said softly, glancing at her 7-year-old daughter in the rearview mirror. Laura pressed her nose against the window, her eyes wide with wonder. "It looks like a castle from my books, Mom." Sarah's throat tightened. "It's just where I'll be working, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? You'll stay with Mrs. Reeves while I work, and we'll be together every night." Her daughters. Reflection nodded solemnly, but Sarah caught the flicker of sadness in those eyes that reminded her so much of herself. Another move, another adjustment, another sacrifice Laura was making because of her mother's circumstances. "It won't be forever," Sarah whispered, more to herself than to her daughter. "Just long enough." The car rolled to a stop before the grand entrance, where stone steps led to mahogany doors that stood twice her height. Sarah drew a deep breath, straightened her simple blouse, and stepped out of the car. "Ms. Mueller." The voice came from a woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun, her posture as rigid as her expression. "I'm Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper. Mr. Burton is expecting you." Sarah nodded, helping Laura from the car. "This is my daughter. She'll only be here today until childcare arrangements are finalized." Mrs. Winters' gaze flickered over Laura with clinical assessment. "Very well. The children are having their lessons. Mr. Burton will meet you in his study. Follow me." The entryway soared 3 stories high, a crystal chandelier hanging like a frozen waterfall above a marble floor, so polished it mirrored their reflections. Sarah's sensible shoes echoed against the cold stone as they followed Mrs. Winters through corridors adorned with artwork that probably cost more than Sarah would earn in a decade. "Wait here," Mrs. Winters instructed, gesturing toward a pair of ornate doors. "And the child should not touch anything." Sarah squeezed Laura's hand. "She won't." Mrs. Winters disappeared through the doors, leaving them alone in the hallway. "Mom," Laura whispered, her voice carrying in the silent corridor. "Are there really 3 of them? The same age as me?" "Yes, triplets," Sarah confirmed. 3 7-year-old boys. "Will they be my friends?" The innocent question pierced Sarah's heart. "Maybe, honey. But remember, I'm here to work. You'll make lots of friends at your new school." The doors opened before Laura could respond, and Mrs. Winters reappeared. "Mr. Burton will see you now." She extended a hand toward Laura. "The child will come with me to meet the other children." Sarah hesitated, instinctively pulling Laura closer. "It's okay, Mom," Laura said with a maturity that sometimes frightened Sarah. "I'll be good." Sarah watched her daughter follow Mrs. Winters down the corridor, the little girl's curly brown hair bouncing with each step, before turning to face her new employer. The study was a testament to masculine power. Dark woods, leather-bound books, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's private lake. Standing with his back to her, a tumbler of amber liquid in hand, was Ethan Burton, a silhouette against the afternoon light. "Mr. Burton," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Sarah Muller." He turned slowly and Sarah steeled herself. The tabloids hadn't done him justice. At 42, Ethan Burton carried his wealth and power in every line of his face, handsome in that unattainable way of men who had never heard the word no with piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess her worth in a single glance. "Ms. Müller," his voice was deep, detached. "Your references are impressive. 7 years at the Hartford Children's Center, followed by private positions with the Walker and Thompson families." "Yes, sir." "And you understand the unique nature of this position? 3 boys, all requiring individual attention while maintaining a cohesive routine. Confidentiality is non-negotiable." Sarah nodded. "I've worked with multiples before, though not triplets. I understand the challenges." "My sons have had 4 nannies in the past 18 months, he continued, setting down his glass. "None lasted more than 4 months. They have specific needs." The implied warning hung in the air between them. Sarah had heard rumors about the Burton triplets, whispers of behavioral issues, of a household ruled by grief and dysfunction since the incident 3 years ago that had claimed their mother. "I read their files," Sarah said carefully. "Oliver struggles with anxiety, Ethan Jr. with aggression, and Alexander with selective mutism. All have shown signs of attachment disorder." Something flickered across Burton's face. Surprise, perhaps that she had done her homework, or displeasure that she had named their struggles so directly. "What the files don't tell you," he said, his voice lowering, "is that my sons have been through more loss than most adults face in a lifetime. The professionals call it trauma-induced behavioral patterns. I call it grief." For the first time, Sarah glimpsed something human beneath the corporate titan exterior, a father struggling to navigate waters too deep for him. "I'm not here to replace what they've lost, Mr. Burton," she said softly. "But I'm good at what I do. I can establish routines, boundaries, and trust. The rest, we'll take one day at a time." He studied her, as if trying to determine whether she was naive or simply foolish. "Mrs. Winters will show you your quarters. You'll meet the boys at dinner. Your daughter. We'll be staying with a neighbor near our apartment in town," Sarah explained. "We have accommodations already arranged. You're prepared to live here 5 days a week. It's what we agreed upon. Weekends with my daughter, weekdays here with your sons." Burton nodded. "The previous nannies found it challenging to separate. The boys can be demanding." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "I've learned to set boundaries, Mr. Burton, both for myself and for the children in my care." Something that might have been respect flashed across his face before the mask of indifference returned. "We'll see if you're still so confident in 2 weeks." He pressed a button on his desk. "Mrs. Winters will show you around." As if summoned by magic, the housekeeper appeared at the door. "This way, Miss Muller." Sarah followed, feeling Burton's eyes on her back as she left. They traversed the east wing, Mrs. Winters pointing out. Rooms with clinical detachment, the formal dining room where the family never ate, the music room where no one played, the library filled with books no one read. The children's wing was on the 2nd floor. 3 adjoining bedrooms connected by a large playroom filled with toys that looked suspiciously untouched. She glimpsed Laura sitting awkwardly on a window seat, watching 3 identical boys with solemn eyes and dark hair, who moved about the room like strangers to one another. "That's Oliver by the bookshelf," Mrs. Winters whispered. "Ethan Jr. with the tablet and Alexander by the window. They haven't spoken a word to your daughter." Sarah's heart sank. The boys moved like ghosts in their own home, their faces blank in a way no 7-year-olds should be. "Your quarters," Mrs. Winters continued, leading her to a suite at the end of the hall. "Private bathroom, sitting area, bedroom. Mr. Burton insists that the nanny be comfortable." The room was larger than Sarah's entire apartment, tastefully decorated in neutral tones. Through a connecting door, she glimpsed a smaller room. "That would be for your daughter, should arrangements change," Mrs. Winters explained with cool efficiency. "Mr. Burton mentioned you might eventually want her closer." Sarah blinked in surprise. "That's very generous. Mr. Burton can be accommodating when it suits him." The words carried an undercurrent of warning. "Dinner is at 6. The boys eat in the small dining room. Mr. Burton usually in his study. You'll dine with the children." Left alone, Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the luxury that somehow felt cold. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Reeves, confirming she could take Laura for the weekdays. Sarah stared out the window at the perfectly manicured grounds, a beautiful prison for 3 little boys who had everything money could buy and nothing of what they truly needed. 2 weeks, she reminded herself. Give it 2 weeks, then re-evaluate. She had no way of knowing that in 2 weeks' time everything would change, and the simple plan she had laid out, work hard, save money, keep her heart closed, would shatter against the reality of what awaited her within these walls. By the 10th day at Burton Estate, Sarah had established a routine that was beginning to show results. Each morning she woke before dawn to prepare for the day ahead, reviewing her notes on each boy's progress like a scientist tracking subtle changes in a complex experiment. Oliver, the most academically inclined of the 3, had started seeking her out with questions about his reading assignments. Ethan Jr., whose aggressive outbursts had initially alarmed her, now channeled his energy into their daily outdoor activities. Even Alexander, who hadn't spoken a word directly to Sarah, had begun leaving small origami animals outside her door, silent, tokens of growing trust. But beneath these fragile improvements lurked an undertow of dysfunction that Sarah couldn't ignore. The boys still ate in silence, communicating in the cryptic shorthand of triplets. They flinched at loud noises and watched their father with wary eyes on the rare occasions he appeared. And each night, without fail, at least one of them would wake screaming from nightmares they refused to discuss. Sarah stood at the kitchen island, preparing the boys' lunch while Mrs. Winters supervised the weekly flower arrangements in the dining room. Through the window she could see the triplets in the garden, engaged in parallel play, together yet separate, like planets in distant orbits. "They've improved," came a deep voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Ethan Burton leaning against the doorframe, his usual immaculate suit replaced by casual slacks and a button-down shirt. These unexpected appearances had become more frequent over the past week, though he rarely engaged directly with his sons. "They're trying," Sarah responded, carefully selecting her words. "They respond well to consistency." Burton moved further into the kitchen, eyeing the elaborate sandwiches she was cutting into animal shapes. "You do this every day?" "Food is communication, Mr. Burton, especially with children who struggle with verbal expression." Something like regret flickered across his face. Their mother used to do that, cut their sandwiches into stars and dinosaurs. The mention of Caroline Burton hung in the air between them. Her absence was the mansion's unacknowledged tenant, lurking in every room, in every silence. Sarah continued working, allowing him the space to either retreat or continue. To her surprise, he stayed, watching her hands with unsettling intensity. "Alexander spoke yesterday," Burton said finally. 3 words to his tutor. First time in 7 months. Sarah smiled softly. "He's been communicating through his origami. I've been leaving him books showing more complex designs." "Mrs. Winters says you've been staying up past midnight. The children's schedules don't require that." The observation caught her off guard. "I've been researching techniques for children with their specific needs. There's an approach from Sweden that—" "That wasn't a criticism, Miss Muller." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Merely an observation that you're exceeding expectations." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you, but I'm just doing my job." "No," he said, his gaze uncomfortably direct. "The last 4 nannies did their job. You're doing something else entirely." Before she could respond, Mrs. Winters appeared in the doorway, her expression tightening at finding them in conversation. "Mr. Burton, your mother-in-law is on line 1. She insists it's urgent." The mention of Caroline's mother transformed Burton instantly. His shoulders tensed, jaw tightening as he nodded curtly. "Excuse me, Ms. Muller." After he left, Sarah felt Mrs. Winters' disapproving gaze. "Victoria Lancaster. Doesn't call unless there's trouble," the housekeeper said, her voice low. "That woman has been trying to get her hands on those boys since her daughter's passing." Sarah arranged the food on plates. "The boys have never mentioned their grandmother, because they rarely see her. Mr. Burton limits contact to holidays and scheduled visits." Mrs. Winters began arranging utensils with mechanical precision. "Let me offer some advice, Miss Muller. This family has wounds you cannot see and cannot heal. Do your job, care for the children, but remember your place." The warning was clear, but it came too late. Sarah was already noticing too much. The locked wing no one entered, the medication Burton took with dinner, the way the staff whispered about the accident, but fell silent when she approached. That evening, as Sarah tucked the boys into their respective beds, Oliver broke their usual silence. "Are you going to leave like the others?" he asked, his voice small in the dimly lit room. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed. "I don't have plans to leave, Oliver. Dad said you have a daughter." His fingers twisted in the expensive sheets. "Is she more important than us?" The innocence and heartbreak behind the question made Sarah's chest ache. "Laura is my daughter, and I love her very much. But that doesn't mean I can't care about you boys too. But you leave on weekends." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Family takes many forms, Oliver. Sometimes we're born into them, sometimes we build them, and sometimes they're the people we take care of. I care about what happens to you, Ethan and Alexander." Oliver's eyes, so like his father's, studied her face for deception. "Ms. Peterson said that too. Then she left after Ethan broke her phone." "People make mistakes," Sarah said gently. "That doesn't make them any less worthy of care and second chances." Later that night, unable to sleep, Sarah wandered the hushed corridors of the East Wing. The mansion at night was a different creature. Shadows stretched across Persian rugs, and family portraits seemed to follow her with painted eyes. She found herself drawn to the library, hoping to locate books that might help Alexander's selective mutism. The massive room, with its two-story shelves and rolling ladders, was illuminated only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. Sarah was reaching for a psychology text when she heard muffled voices from behind the adjacent wall. Following the sound, she discovered a hidden door camouflaged as a bookshelf slightly ajar. "Can't keep avoiding this, Ethan," a woman's voice hissed. "The anniversary is next month, and the board is expecting you to make an appearance." "I'm well aware of my obligations, Victoria." Burton's voice was cold, controlled. "Are you? Because your behavior suggests otherwise. 3 years of hiding in this mausoleum, neglecting the company, neglecting my grandsons." "Don't presume to lecture me about neglect," Burton interrupted, his tone dangerous. "Not when you're the one who pushed Caroline to take that trip against her doctor's advice." Sarah froze, knowing she should retreat but unable to move. "How dare you?" The woman's voice trembled with fury. "I lost my daughter that day. You lost a wife, but I lost my child. And your solution is to try to take my children. The petition for shared custody, Victoria. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Custody battle. The pieces began falling into place. The boy's anxiety, Burton's hypervigilance, the fortress-like security of the estate. "Those boys need a mother figure," Victoria insisted. "You're drowning, Ethan. The drinking, the isolation. Do you think Caroline would want this for her children?" "The board is concerned. The shareholders are concerned." "The board and shareholders have nothing to do with my sons." "They have everything to do with your son's future," Victoria snapped. The Lancaster-Burton merger was more than a marriage. "Ethan, it was the joining of 2 dynasties. Without Caroline, that alliance is fragile at best." There was a long silence, then Burton's voice, lower now. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. Either you pull yourself together and return to your role as CEO, or I'll have no choice but to pursue what's best for my grandson's financial security." Sarah backed away silently, her mind reeling with implications. The casual wealth surrounding her wasn't just wealth, it was an empire, and the 3 quiet boys upstairs were its reluctant heirs. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. When Sarah finally held Laura in her arms in their small apartment, the contrast between her 2 worlds was jarring. Here, in their humble 2-bedroom with mismatched furniture and crayon drawings on the refrigerator, life felt honest. "Do they have a pool, Mummy?" Laura asked as they prepared dinner together. "Tommy at school says all rich people have pools." Sarah smiled, chopping vegetables. "Yes, they have a pool, but the boys don't use it much." "Why not? If I had a pool, I'd swim every day." The innocent question struck a nerve. Why didn't the boys swim? Why did they have rooms full of toys they barely touched, a home theater they never used, a garden they only walked through with reluctance? Sometimes, Sarah said carefully, having things isn't the same as enjoying them. That night, after Laura was asleep, Sarah made a phone call she'd been postponing. "Jen, it's Sarah. I need to ask about that job offer in Chicago again." "Her?" Friend's voice brightened. "It's still open. The center would love to have you as program director. When can you start?" Sarah stared out the window at the light pollution that obscured the stars. "I'm not sure yet. I just need to know it's there. Is everything okay with the Burton position?" "It's complicated," Sarah admitted. "The job isn't what I expected." "You mean the millionaire eye candy employer isn't what you expected?" Jen teased. "Billionaire," Sarah corrected absently, then regretted it when Jen whistled low. "Careful, Sarah. Remember what happened with the Thompsons. You got too attached to their situation, and you were the one who ended up hurt." The reminder stung because it was true. Sarah had a history of overinvesting emotionally, of trying to fix broken families only to discover some breaks were beyond her repair. "It's different this time," Sarah insisted, not entirely. Convinced herself, "I'm just doing my job." But as she returned to the estate Sunday evening, the weight of what she'd learned settled over her. The custody threats, the corporate pressures, the unhealed grief, all of it created an atmosphere of looming crisis. And at the center of it all were three little boys who watched the world with wary eyes, waiting for the next adult to abandon them. Sarah found Burton in his study, silhouetted against the windows as he had been on her first day. But something was different. The rigid posture had slackened, and when he turned, his eyes were bloodshot. "The boys missed you," he said without preamble, his voice rougher than usual. The simple statement caught her off guard. "They seem to be adjusting well to the routine. Alexander asked for you this morning out loud." Sarah's heart squeezed. "What did he say?" "Where's Miss Sarah?" Burton mimicked his son's soft voice. First full sentence in over a year. Pride. And something deeper washed through her. "That's wonderful progress." Burton ran a hand through his usually immaculate hair. "My mother-in-law visited yesterday." Sarah tensed, wondering if he knew she had overheard their argument. "I hope it went well." "It never goes well with Victoria." He moved to the desk where papers were scattered in uncharacteristic disarray. "She's pressing for shared custody again, using my absences from the company as evidence of instability." Sarah chose her words carefully. "The boys need stability. Mr. Burton, they need consistent presence." "Are you suggesting I'm an absent father, Miss Mueller?" The dangerous edge had returned to his voice. "I'm suggesting that healing happens in relationship," Sarah said quietly, "and relationships require presence." For a moment, she thought she'd overstepped. Burton stared at her with an unreadable expression before his shoulders sagged slightly. "They were supposed to be Caroline's project," he admitted, the words seeming to surprise even him. "I was building the business, and she was building our family. When the accident happened, I didn't know how to step into that role." The vulnerability in his confession cracked something open in Sarah's carefully constructed professional boundaries. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by a small figure in the doorway, Alexander clutching a paper crane in trembling fingers. "Bad dream," he whispered, looking not at his father, but at Sarah. As Sarah moved instinctively toward the boy, she caught Burton's expression, a complex mixture of relief and grief, of gratitude and resentment. In that moment, Sarah realized she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. These children were no longer just a job to her, and this broken family was becoming entangled with her own, in ways she hadn't anticipated. 2 weeks had indeed changed everything, just as Burton had predicted. But neither of them could have foreseen how those changes would reshape all their lives in the coming storm. The first signs of autumn painted the Burton estate grounds in flaming hues of amber and crimson. 6 weeks into her employment, Sarah stood at the boys' bedroom windows, watching them play soccer on the lawn, actually playing together, not just occupying the same space as they had when she first arrived. Oliver was keeping score, Ethan Jr. displaying surprising patience with Alexander's hesitant kicks, small victories that felt monumental. "They look almost normal," Mrs. Winters remarked, entering with fresh linens. Her tone carried no warmth, only clinical observation. Sarah nodded. "They're making progress. Mr. Burton seems to think so. He's cancelled his Tokyo trip next week to attend their school presentation." The news surprised Sarah. Ethan Burton had been gradually increasing his presence in his sons' lives, joining them for breakfast twice a week, asking about their schoolwork, even sitting through a painfully awkward movie night. But cancelling international business was unprecedented. "That will mean a lot to them," Sarah said carefully, aware of the housekeeper's watchful gaze. Mrs. Winters smoothed an already perfect bedspread. "Ms. Lancaster called this morning. She's coming for dinner tomorrow." Sarah's stomach tightened. Victoria Lancaster's monthly visits were exercises in tension, with the elegant older woman inspecting the estate like a general surveying enemy territory, peppering the boys with questions about their care, and engaging Burton in conversations that inevitably ended behind closed doors. "Thank you for letting me know," Sarah replied neutrally. "She's requested your presence at dinner," Mrs. Winters added, watching for Sarah's reaction. "With the children?" That was new. Sarah had always been instructed to make herself scarce during Victoria's visits. "I'll adjust the boys' schedule." After Mrs. Winters left, Sarah returned to watching the children, a familiar worry gnawing at her. Her position at Burton Estate had evolved far beyond professional boundaries. The boys now waited for her goodnight kiss before sleeping, saved their achievements to show her first, and had begun asking when Laura might visit again after her brief introduction weeks ago. Laura, too, had grown attached, peppering Sarah with questions about her boys, as she had begun calling them. The separate worlds Sarah had tried to maintain were blurring dangerously. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jen in Chicago. "Deadline for job decision is next Friday. Need to know if you're coming." The reminder sent a wave of anxiety through her. The program director position offered stability, regular hours, benefits, everything a single mother should prioritize. Yet the thought of leaving now, when the boys were finally emerging from their shells, felt like abandonment. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Burton stood in the doorway, more approachable now in casual weekend attire, though no less intimidating. "Ms. Mueller." "A word?" She followed him to his study, now familiar territory. The room had gradually transformed during her tenure. Family photos had appeared on the previously sterile desk, children's artwork framed alongside financial certificates, small signs of life reclaiming space from grief. "Victoria is coming tomorrow," he began without preamble, pouring water instead of his usual scotch. "She's requested your presence." Mrs. Winters mentioned it. Burton leaned against his desk, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Before you meet her properly, there are things you should know." Sarah waited, sensing the gravity in his tone. 3 years ago, Caroline was diagnosed with postpartum depression that developed into severe anxiety. His voice remained steady, but his fingers tightened around his glass. "It went untreated for too long. The boys were 4 when things became unmanageable. Victoria pushed for residential treatment against my wishes. I wanted home care, familiar surroundings." Sarah's heart raced as the pieces clicked into place. The locked wing, the boys, anxiety around separation, their nightmares. "We compromised with a Swiss clinic," Burton continued. "Private, exclusive, with accommodations for the whole family to visit regularly. It was supposed to be a 6-week program." He turned to the window, profile sharp against afternoon light. "Caroline never came home. Her helicopter crashed into Lake Geneva during a storm, returning from a day trip Victoria had arranged against medical advice." The raw pain in his voice made Sarah ache to reach out, but she remained still, giving him space to continue. "Victoria blames me for insisting on the Swiss clinic. I blame her for pushing Caroline beyond her limits. The boys," his voice faltered. "The boys were there. Not in the helicopter, thank God, but at the clinic. They watched the search from the windows." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, imagining the trauma of 3 4-year-old boys witnessing such horror. Victoria filed for partial custody 6 months later, Burton finished, claiming I was emotionally unavailable, that the boys needed maternal influence. The court sided with me, but she's persistent. And tomorrow's dinner is another assessment, Sarah surmised. Burton nodded. She's bringing her attorney, just an old family friend joining us, she claims. Sarah processed this information, understanding now why Victoria's visits left everyone on edge. What do you need from me? Just be yourself with the boys, he said. They trust you. That matters more than Victoria realizes. The simple acknowledgement warmed her unexpectedly. Mr. Burton, Ethan, he interrupted. After all this time, in private at least, I think we can dispense with formalities. The shift felt significant, dangerous even. Ethan, she tried, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. The boys have come so far, but they're still fragile. This kind of tension affects them deeply. I know. His expression softened with regret. I've made mistakes, Sarah. Retreating into work, leaving them with strangers. I convinced myself they were better off without a father who reminded them of everything they'd lost. The admission hung between them, honest in a way their interactions had never been. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. Insistently, Laura's school. Excuse me, she said, answering quickly. This is Sarah Muller. The nurse's voice was apologetic. Ms. Muller, Laura has a fever of 102. School policy requires immediate pickup. Sarah's heart sank. I'll be there as soon as possible. Ending the call, she turned to Burton. I'm sorry, I need to go. Laura's sick. To her surprise, concern immediately replaced his previous intensity. Take the car and drive her. It's faster. Then waiting for a taxi. Thank you, but I can't leave the boys before dinner. I'll handle dinner, he insisted. Your daughter needs you. The unexpected compassion caught her off guard. I'll make it up tomorrow. Sarah. His use of her first name stopped her. Go, family comes first. I understand that better now than I did when you arrived. An hour later, Sarah cradled a feverish Laura in their small apartment, watching her daughter drift into uneasy sleep. The contrast between the opulent Burton estate and her modest home had never felt more pronounced, nor had the division of her heart between these two worlds. Her phone lit up with a text from a number she didn't recognize. The boys are asking, for you. They won't eat their vegetables without the airplane game. Any suggestions? Ethan. The message brought a smile despite her worry. She typed back, try the submarine game instead. Oliver loves making the diving sound. 3 dots appeared then. Submarine successful. Alexander laughed. Hope Laura feels better. That night, as Laura's fever finally broke, Sarah made a difficult decision. She texted Jen. Need more time? On Chicago. Can you extend the deadline? The response came quickly. 2 more weeks, Max. The board is pushing for an answer. 2 more weeks to decide whether to uproot her life again, to leave 3 boys who had finally begun to trust her, to walk away from a job that had become far more than employment. The following evening, Sarah left Laura with Mrs. Reeves and returned to the Burton estate, just as Victoria Lancaster's sleek Mercedes pulled through the gates. Sarah had only glimpsed the woman during previous visits, tall and aristocratic, with Caroline's delicate features hardened by grief and determination. The boys were unusually subdued as Sarah helped them dress for dinner, their earlier playfulness replaced by practiced politeness. Grandmother brings presents, Alexander whispered, the most words he'd strung together in Sarah's presence. But then she makes Dad angry. Sarah squeezed his shoulder gently. Sometimes grown-ups disagree, but that doesn't mean they don't both love you very much. Oliver, always the most perceptive, studied her face. Are you scared of her too? The question startled her. I'm not scared of your grandmother, Oliver. I just haven't met her properly yet. She won't like you, Ethan Jr. stated matter-of-factly, straightening his tie with the precision of someone 3 times his age. She doesn't like anyone Dad hires. The dining room gleamed with crystal, hand-silver formal settings that seemed to emphasize the artifice of the occasion. Victoria Lancaster commanded attention the moment she entered, expensively elegant in a tailored dress that suggested mourning without explicitly declaring it, her silver-streaked blonde hair swept into a chignon. "Alexander, darling, you've grown at least an inch," she declared, bending to kiss each boy with practiced affection. Her gaze then settled on Sarah, assessment clear in eyes so like her late daughter's. "You must be Miss Muller. The boys have mentioned you in their phone calls." Sarah extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Lancaster." "Victoria, please." Her handshake was cool, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I understand you have a daughter. How old?" "Laura is 7, Mom." "The same age as my grandsons. How convenient." A subtle emphasis on the last word carried layers of implication. "Do the children interact often?" "They've met once, briefly," Sarah replied, sensing the undercurrent but maintaining her composure. The silver-haired man beside Victoria cleared his throat. "Victoria, perhaps introductions?" "Of course, this is Richard Harmond, our family attorney for over 30 years. The way she emphasized family suggested deeper connections than professional ones. Burton entered then, his expression carefully controlled. "Victoria, Richard, I see you've met Ms. Muller." Dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness, the boys answering their grandmother's questions with rehearsed precision. Sarah noticed how Victoria directed her attention primarily to Oliver, the firstborn by 7 minutes, and therefore the technical heir to both family legacies. "Oliver tells me you've been teaching them French," Victoria remarked between courses. "How European." The boys showed an interest, Sarah explained. "They're quite gifted with languages." "They get that from Caroline," Victoria said pointedly. "She spoke 4 languages fluently by the time she was 12. Burton's knuckles whitened around his water glass. "Sarah has introduced a number of educational innovations. The boys' tutors report significant improvement." Victoria raised an eyebrow at his use of Sarah's first name, but redirected smoothly. "Alexander, darling, Grandmother has arranged for you to attend the Young Musicians Summer Program next year. Your mother excelled there." Alexander's eyes widened in alarm, seeking Sarah's reassurance across the table. "That's nearly a year away, Victoria," Burton interjected. "Let's not overwhelm him with plans." "It's exclusive, Ethan," Victoria countered. "Registrations close soon. Caroline would have wanted him to develop his talents." The weaponization of Caroline's memory hung heavy in the air. "Alexander has been making remarkable progress with his current music therapist," Sarah said gently. "Dramatic changes might disrupt that momentum." Victoria's gaze hardened. "Tell me, Miss Muller, where did you study child development? What are your credentials for making such assessments?" "Sarah has 7 years' experience with traumatized children," Burton answered before she could, "and more importantly, she has the boys' trust." "Trust is valuable," Richard commented, speaking for the first time, "but professional qualifications matter in certain contexts. Legal contexts, for instance." The veiled threat silenced the table until Mrs. Winters arrived to escort the boys upstairs for dessert. Once they had gone, Victoria's demeanor shifted, from poised grandmother to calculated adversary. "Ethan, I'll be direct. The board is losing patience. 3 years of delegating your CEO responsibilities while the Lancaster holdings remain in limbo is unsustainable." "My holdings are separate from Lancaster Industries," Burton replied evenly, "as we've established repeatedly." "The merger agreement specified certain conditions," Richard noted. "Conditions that assumed active management from both families." Sarah began to stand. "Perhaps I should—" "Stay," Burton said, not looking away from Victoria. "This concerns you now." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Does it? How fascinating." She turned to Sarah. "Richard has been investigating your background, Miss Muller. Your departure from the Thompson household was rather abrupt, wasn't it?" Sarah's blood ran cold. The Thompson situation had been complicated, a messy divorce where both parents had used their young daughter as a pawn. Sarah had grown too attached, advocated too strongly for the child's well-being, and ultimately been dismissed with thinly veiled threats of legal action if she didn't leave quietly. "My employment history is a matter of record," Sarah said carefully, "and confidential." "Nothing is truly confidential these days," Victoria replied, "especially when children's welfare is involved." Burton's voice remained dangerously calm. Is there a point to this, Victoria? Merely pointing out that Ms. Mueller's pattern of emotional overinvestment might be relevant to her current role. Victoria sipped her wine, especially given her influence over my grandsons during this vulnerable period. Sarah has been exactly what the boys need, Burton stated firmly. Has she? Victoria set down her glass. Or has she simply been what you need, Ethan, a convenient surrogate mother figure who allows you to continue avoiding your responsibilities? The accusation hung in the air, too close to fears Sarah herself had harbored. Was she enabling Burton's emotional distance rather than helping bridge it? I've postponed Tokyo, Burton said abruptly. I'm attending the boys' presentation next week and reducing travel for the foreseeable future. This news clearly surprised Victoria. The Singapore expansion requires your personal... Jacob can handle Singapore. My priority is here. Victoria studied him with new calculation. One school presentation doesn't constitute parenting, Ethan. No, but it's a start. Burton's gaze briefly met Sarah's. Sometimes we need someone to show us what we've been missing. The evening concluded with Victoria extracting promises from Burton to attend the upcoming charity gala, Caroline's favorite annual event, and to bring the boys for Thanksgiving at the Lancaster estate. As they stood in the foyer awaiting her departure, Victoria drew Sarah aside. My daughter loved those boys more than life itself, she said, her voice low and intense. She sacrificed everything for their well-being. I believe that, Sarah replied honestly. Then believe this. I will not allow any threat to their inheritance or their legacy. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers closed around Sarah's wrist. They have a place in this world that was secured before their birth. Don't imagine your temporary presence changes that. After they left, Sarah found Burton in his study, staring at a photograph of Caroline holding the newborn triplets. I should have warned you, he said without turning. Victoria's investigations are thorough. The Thompsons, Sarah acknowledged. It wasn't my finest moment professionally. According to the private investigator's report, you threatened to report them to Child Protective Services for using their daughter as a psychological weapon in their divorce. Now he turned, expression unreadable. Then you tried to maintain contact with the child after your dismissal. Heat rose in Sarah's cheeks. I overstepped. I was younger, less experienced. You were right, Burton interrupted. CPS eventually did intervene. The child now lives with her grandparents, which by all accounts has been her salvation. Sarah stared at him, processing this information she'd never been able to access. Victoria sees your concern for my sons as a threat, he continued. I see it as their best chance at healing. The weight of his words settled between them, an acknowledgement of changing dynamics, of boundaries crossed and redrawn. The job in Chicago, he said, surprising her. Mrs. Reeves mentioned it when she called about Laura yesterday. Sarah tensed. It's just an opportunity I'm considering. Program director at the Lakeside Children's Center. Prestigious, stable. 9 to 5 hours with your daughter. His tone revealed nothing of his thoughts. When would you start? I haven't accepted, Sarah said, unsettled by his knowledge of her private considerations. It's complicated. Because of the boys, he surmised. Because of all of this, she admitted. The boys are making progress. Leaving now would be abandonment, he finished. At least, that's how they would perceive it. The truth of it stung. I have to consider Laura's needs too. Of course. He moved toward her, stopping closer than propriety dictated. But consider this as well. Victoria will use any means to gain control of her grandson's future. If you stay, you'll be in her crosshairs. Is that a warning to leave or to be prepared? Sarah asked, holding his gaze. Something shifted in his expression, respect perhaps, or something deeper. That depends on why you'd choose to stay. The question laid bare the evolving complexity of her position at Burton Estate. Was she staying for professional fulfillment? For the children who had claimed pieces of her heart, or for the increasingly complicated feelings she harbored for their father? Before she could formulate an answer, A scream tore through the house, high-pitched and terrified. They both raced toward the sound, taking the stairs 2 at a time, to find Ethan Jr. thrashing in his bed, locked in a nightmare while his brothers watched with wide, frightened eyes. "No, don't take her," the boy sobbed as Sarah gathered him into her arms. "The water's too high, Mum can't swim." As Sarah rocked him awake, murmuring reassurances, she caught Burton's expression over the child's heaving shoulders, raw anguish and helpless love. In that moment, their shared concern for the children transcended all other complications. Later, after all 3 boys had been calmed, Sarah found Burton sitting on the floor outside their rooms, head in his hands. "He hasn't had that particular nightmare in months," he said hoarsely. Sarah sat beside him, professional boundaries forgotten in the emotional aftermath. Victoria's visit triggered memories. "I've been trying to protect them," he whispered. "From the truth. From Victoria's. Manipulations, from my own failings. But I don't know if I'm doing more harm than good." "Children are resilient," Sarah said gently, "but they need honesty even when it's painful." Burton looked at her then, vulnerability naked on his face. "Stay, Sarah. Not for me, but for them. Help me find a way through this." The plea resonated through her, colliding with her responsibilities to Laura, her own uncertain future, and the growing awareness that her involvement with the Burton family had crossed into dangerous territory. Victoria's warnings echoed in her mind, alongside Jen's reminder about the Chicago deadline, and her own internal caution about repeating past mistakes. But as she met Burton's gaze, Ethan's gaze, the decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. Some risks were worth taking, some battles worth fighting. "2 conditions," she said finally. "Laura stays here on weekends, not across town, and we start being honest with the boys about everything, your work, their mother, their future." Relief washed across his features. Agreed. Neither of them could have anticipated how soon that honesty would be tested, or how the fragile peace they had established would shatter against revelations that had been buried since the day of Caroline's accident. The charity gala at the Lancaster estate loomed like a storm on the horizon. For 2 weeks following Victoria's dinner visit, Sarah had watched Ethan gradually reclaim his role as father, joining the boys for breakfast daily, helping with homework, even attempting to cook dinner one disastrous but laughter-filled evening. The transformation wasn't seamless, but it was genuine, his corporate mask softening when he was with his sons. The night before the gala, Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor of her suite, helping Laura arrange her collection of seashells. Having her daughter at the mansion on weekends had brought both worlds into harmony. The boys had welcomed Laura with unexpected warmth, especially Alexander, who seemed to find her chattering presence soothing. "Dad says I can call him Ethan now," Laura announced, carefully positioning a pink scallop shell. "He showed me how to make paper boats that really float." Sarah looked up sharply. "Dad?" Laura blinked innocently. "That's what the boys call him. Ethan Jr. says it's confusing when I say your dad, so I can just say Dad too." A complicated emotion tightened Sarah's chest. "Laura, sweetheart, he's not actually your dad." "I know that," Laura rolled her eyes with 7-year-old exasperation. "But Oliver says we're like a family now, and families use the same words." Before Sarah could formulate a response, a soft knock at the door revealed Mrs. Winters, her customary severe expression replaced by something almost like concern. "Miss Muller, a delivery arrived for you." She handed Sarah a thick envelope bearing the Lancaster Industries logo. "Mr. Burton is in his study." Inside the envelope, Sarah found formal gala invitations for herself and Laura, along with a handwritten note in Ethan's precise script. "The boys insist you both attend. Victoria won't be pleased, but it's time to stop hiding what matters. Car leaves at 7. Sarah found Ethan in his study, tension evident in the set of his shoulders as he adjusted his bow tie before a mirror. "You can't be serious," she said, holding up the invitations. "Victoria will see this as deliberate provocation." It is deliberate, he admitted, turning to face her, but not merely as provocation. The boys want you there. I want you there. The simple declaration hung between them, weighted with implications neither had fully articulated. The Lancaster Autumn Gala isn't just a charity event, Sarah pointed out. It's a corporate showcase, a family tradition. Victoria will interpret my presence, and especially Laura's, as a statement. Let her. Something had hardened in Ethan's expression, a resolution crystallizing. For 3 years, I've allowed Victoria to dictate the terms of my sons' lives, to weaponize their mother's memory, to treat them as Lancaster heirs first and children second. This isn't just about Victoria, Sarah said carefully. We haven't prepared the boys for the scrutiny they'll face. The press will be there, people who knew Caroline, people who whisper about the reclusive widower and his troubled sons. Ethan's smile was sharp. Let them see the truth then, that my sons are healing, that we're moving forward. The unspoken together lingered in the air between them. Sarah studied him, recognizing the determination behind his words and the fear beneath that determination. The boy's therapist has advised against public events until I've discussed it with Dr. Winters, Ethan interrupted. She agrees it's time for controlled exposure. The boys can leave early if it becomes overwhelming. Sarah recognized the familiar feeling of being outmaneuvered by him. And Laura? She has no connection to this world. Something softened in his expression. That's not entirely true anymore, is it? The question struck uncomfortably close to the evolving reality Sarah had been avoiding naming. Over the past months, boundaries had blurred, professional lines crossed with increasing frequency. The boys treated Laura like a sister. Ethan treated Sarah as something far more than an employee, and she had allowed her heart to become entangled in ways that terrified her. We haven't discussed what happens after Chicago, she said quietly. The reminder of her still pending decision landed heavily between them. The Lakeside Center had extended their deadline twice, but their patience was wearing thin. 3 days remained before she had to commit or decline. No, Ethan acknowledged. We haven't. Before they could venture further into that fraught territory, Oliver appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a miniature tuxedo. Alexander won't wear his tie, he reported solemnly. He says his throat feels funny. Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look that contained volumes, concern, understanding, a silent agreement to postpone their unfinished conversation. I'll talk to him, Sarah said, following Oliver upstairs. She found Alexander sitting on his bed, small fingers working an intricate paper crane. Having trouble with the tie? She asked gently, sitting beside him. He nodded without looking up. Last time I wore one was at Mom's funeral. The simple truth stunned her. Of course, the formal clothes would trigger memories of that terrible day. What if we try something different? Sarah suggested, picking up the discarded silk tie. This doesn't have to be like that day. Carefully, she folded the tie into a more casual style. This is how musicians wear them sometimes, like in those jazz albums you like. Alexander watched her hands, then tentatively touched the redesigned tie. Dad won't mind. I think Dad wants you to feel comfortable more than anything else. The boy studied her face with that penetrating gaze so like his father's. Are you and Laura coming to live with us forever? The question caught her off guard. Alexander. Dad's different when you're here, he continued, his selective mutism completely absent when they were alone. He smiles more, and Laura makes everything better. Sarah chose her words with extreme care. Your dad has been working very hard to be present for you boys. That's separate from me. Alexander's expression turned skeptical. But you help him, and us. That's my job, she said gently. To help. Miss Peterson said that too, but she didn't love us. His frank assessment left Sarah speechless. You do, I can tell. Before she could formulate a response that honored both truth and appropriate boundaries, Ethan Jr. burst into the room. Dad says the car is ready. Sarah, are you wearing that? His critical tone carried the influence of his fashion-conscious grandmother. Sarah glanced down at her simple black dress, elegant but understated. Yes, this is what I'm wearing. Ethan Jr. frowned. Grandmother says ladies wear fancy dresses to the gala, with sparkles. Well, this is fancy for me, Sarah assured him, grateful for the change of subject. Let's find Laura and get going. The Lancaster estate made Burton Mansion look modest by comparison. A sprawling Georgian-style compound overlooking the Atlantic, illuminated by thousands of lights that reflected off the water. As their car joined the procession of luxury, vehicles approaching the circular drive, Sarah felt Laura press against her side. "There are so many people," her daughter whispered, wide-eyed. "Stay close to me," Sarah murmured, suddenly questioning the wisdom of bringing a 7-year-old to such an event. Ethan must have sensed her anxiety. "We'll make our appearance. Let the boys fulfill their obligations to Victoria and leave by 9, he assured her as the car stopped. 2 hours, maximum. The moment they entered the grand ballroom, Sarah understood why he'd been so insistent on their presence. Every eye turned toward them, the reclusive Ethan Burton with not only his sons but their nanny and her daughter in tow. The statement couldn't have been clearer if he'd taken out a full-page advertisement. Victoria spotted them immediately, her practiced smile freezing as she registered Laura clutching Sarah's hand. With remarkable composure, she glided across the room. "Ethan, boys, how wonderful to see you." Her gaze slid over Sarah and Laura with glacial politeness. "I wasn't aware you were bringing additional guests." "The boys insisted," Ethan replied smoothly. "They didn't want to attend without Sarah and Laura." Victoria's smile remained fixed. "How thoughtful. Although I'm not certain we have appropriate accommodations for a child her age." "Laura will be with me," Sarah said firmly. "We won't require special arrangements." "Of course." Victoria turned to her grandsons, bending to kiss each one. "Your mother loved this event. She used to call it autumn magic. The children's room upstairs has been prepared with activities, if you'd prefer that to the adult gathering." Alexander pressed closer to Sarah, shaking his head slightly. "The boys will remain with us for now," Ethan said, his hand resting protectively on Oliver's shoulder. Victoria straightened, challenge clear in her eyes. "As you wish." The Lancaster Burton Foundation presentation begins in 30 minutes. The board members are particularly eager to see the boys. As Victoria departed to greet other guests, Sarah felt a subtle shift in Ethan's demeanor, a tension that hadn't been present at the mansion. "Foundation presentation?" she questioned quietly as they moved through the crowded room. "A formality," he dismissed. "The boys are too young to be officially involved, but Victoria insists on their presence as symbolic heirs." Throughout the evening, Sarah observed the complex power dynamics at play. Victoria orchestrated a parade of introductions, business, associates, family, friends, board members, all studying the boys with calculating interest that had little to do with childish charm. Oliver, as the eldest, received the lion's share of attention, while Ethan Jr. and Alexander were relegated to supporting roles. "He looks so much like Caroline," one elderly board member remarked, studying Oliver as if appraising livestock. "Let's hope he inherits her financial instincts as well." Sarah felt Laura's small hand squeeze hers tighter, her daughter picking up on the increasing tension. The boys, too, were wilting under the scrutiny, Alexander retreating into silence, Ethan Jr. becoming increasingly fidgety. When Victoria summoned them for the foundation presentation, Sarah noticed a subtle exchange between Ethan and Richard Harmond, a nod that seemed laden with meaning. Something was happening beneath the polished surface of the event. The presentation took place in an adjoining ballroom where a small stage had been set up. Victoria Lancaster stood at the podium, resplendent in midnight blue, speaking eloquently about her daughter's vision for the foundation, medical research, educational initiatives, conservation efforts spanning 2 continents. Caroline's legacy lives on not only through her charitable vision, Victoria concluded, but through her beautiful sons, who will one day take the helm of this foundation and the combined Lancaster-Burton enterprises. "Oliver, Ethan, Alexander, please join your grandmother." The boys looked to their father, who nodded encouragingly. As they reluctantly made their way to the stage, Sarah noticed Richard Harmond slipping away through a side door. Victoria beamed as she positioned the boys beside her. The future of two great families stands before you, she announced to applause. And now I'd like to share exciting news about the Foundation's expansion. Excuse me, Victoria. Ethan's voice cut through the room as he approached the stage. Before you continue, there's something that needs to be addressed. A murmur rippled through the audience. Victoria's smile remained fixed, though her eyes flashed warning. This can wait for a more appropriate setting, Ethan. No, it can't. Ethan took the microphone with calm authority. For 3 years, the narrative surrounding my wife's accident has gone unchallenged. Tonight, that changes. The room fell silent. Sarah felt a chill of premonition as Richard Harmond returned, accompanied by an unfamiliar man carrying a leather portfolio. My wife suffered from severe postpartum depression, Ethan stated, his voice steady despite the personal nature of the revelation. A condition that was exploited rather than treated with the care she deserved. Victoria stepped forward. Ethan, this is neither the time nor... The helicopter that crashed wasn't scheduled to fly that day, Ethan continued. The trip was arranged against medical advice, pressuring Caroline to attend a Lancaster Industries meeting despite her doctor's explicit instructions for rest. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victoria's composure finally cracked. How dare you use this occasion to slander? I have signed affidavits from Caroline's doctors, Ethan interrupted, nodding to Richard, who approached with the portfolio, as well as evidence that maintenance concerns about the helicopter were dismissed to accommodate the schedule change. Gasps and whispers swept through the crowd. Sarah instinctively gathered the boys closer, moving them off the stage as the adults' confrontation escalated. For 3 years, I've allowed guilt and grief to silence me, Ethan continued. I agreed to Victoria's conditions, limiting my son's therapy to approved providers, maintaining Caroline's public image at the expense of truth, allowing Victoria unprecedented access to corporate decisions that rightfully belong to my son's future. Victoria's face had drained of color. You're making a grave mistake. No, the mistake was allowing you to use my sons as pawns in your attempt to control both family legacies. Ethan's voice remained calm, but his eyes blazed. Effective immediately, I am restructuring the Foundation's board and establishing an independent trust for my sons that will be managed without Lancaster interference until they reach adulthood. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Corporate alliances worth billions were being dismantled before their eyes. You can't do this, Victoria hissed, abandoning pretense. The merger agreement has provisions for misconduct and breaches. So fiduciary duty, Richard interjected smoothly. All relevant documentation has been filed with the SEC this evening. Sarah guided the children toward a quiet alcove, away from the spectacle. Laura's eyes were wide with confusion, while the boys appeared surprisingly calm, as if they had been prepared for this moment. Did you know? Sarah asked them quietly. Oliver nodded. Dad told us this morning. He said Grandmother has been lying about Mom, and he needed to protect us. He said the truth might be scary, but it's better than secrets, Ethan Jr. added, and that you helped him understand that. Before Sarah could process this revelation, Victoria's voice rose above the commotion. Ask him about the nanny, she called out, pointing directly at Sarah. Ask why a woman with a history of inappropriate attachments to her charges has been given unlimited access to my grandsons. All eyes turned toward Sarah. Ethan immediately moved to her side, his expression thunderous. Sarah Mueller has done more for my son's healing in 6 months than all of Victoria's approved therapists accomplished in 3 years, he stated firmly. She has become essential to our family's well-being. The word family hung in the air, its implications unmistakable. Victoria seized upon it immediately. Family, she echoed with deadly precision. Is that what you're calling this arrangement? How convenient that your son's nanny has a daughter exactly their age. One might almost suspect calculation. The accusation struck with intended force. Sarah felt Laura press against her, sensing the attack even without fully understanding it. That's enough, Victoria, Ethan warned. But Victoria had found her counterattack. The board should question why Ethan has installed this woman and her daughter in Caroline's place, barely 3 years after her passing, she continued, addressing the crowd directly. What influence she wields over impressionable children with a vast inheritance. Stop! The command came not from Ethan, but from Alexander, his voice clear and unwavering. You're being mean, grandmother. Sarah loves us. She doesn't care about money. A hush fell over the room. Alexander, who spoke to almost no one, stood straight-backed and resolute. Mom would like her, he continued with simple certainty, because she makes us happy. The simple truth, delivered from the least expected source, seemed to deflate Victoria's momentum. For a moment, she looked genuinely stricken, perhaps recognizing her own grandson's indictment, or perhaps simply calculating her diminishing options. This isn't over, Ethan, she said finally, her voice low. Not legally, not publicly, not within the family. You're right about one thing, Ethan agreed, his gaze moving from Victoria to Sarah and the children clustered around her. This isn't over, but the terms have changed. My sons will know their mother as she truly was, brilliant, loving, and human. They will inherit what Caroline and I built together, but how they shape that inheritance will be their choice, not yours. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of whispers and speculative glances. Sarah focused entirely on the children, insulating them from the aftermath of what amounted to a corporate coup and family schism in one explosive evening. By the time they returned to Burton Estate, the boys were asleep in the car, exhausted by the emotional maelstrom. As the staff carried them to their beds, Sarah lingered in the foyer with Laura dozing against her shoulder. You knew what would happen tonight, she said quietly to Ethan once they were alone. You brought us into the middle of a war. Ethan's expression was complicated, triumph mingled with regret. I brought you into the truth. Victoria has been manipulating the narrative since Caroline's accident, using the boys as her proxies, positioning herself as the guardian of Caroline's legacy, while systematically undermining my authority as their father. The affidavits, the evidence, you've been planning this for months. It wasn't quite an accusation, but close. Since you arrived, he admitted. Watching you with the boys, seeing how they responded to honesty and emotional presence, it made me question everything I'd accepted about our situation. Sarah shifted Laura's weight, buying time to process his words. Victoria's accusations about me were desperate attempts to regain control, Ethan finished. But Alexander was right. You've brought something back to this house that disappeared with Caroline. Not just for the boys, but for me. The nakedness of the admission hung between them, demanding acknowledgement Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to give. I should put Laura to bed, she said finally. Ethan nodded, understanding her retreat. The Chicago deadline is Monday. Yes. And now you have even more to consider. His tone remained neutral, but his eyes asked the question he wouldn't voice directly. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I've always put Laura's needs first. That won't change. And if what Laura needs aligns with what my sons need, with what I need? The question penetrated all her carefully constructed defenses. Ethan, I'm not asking for an answer tonight, he said gently. Just ask yourself one question. Where is home now, Sarah, for both of you? That night, after settling Laura in bed, Sarah stood at the window of their suite, staring out at the moonlit gardens of Burton Estate. 6 months ago, she had arrived with a simple plan. Work hard, remain detached, provide for Laura's future. Now she found herself central to a family drama spanning generations, with 3 boys who looked to her for stability, and a man whose complex grief had begun to heal under her influence. The Chicago position represented safety, predictability, professional advancement. Burton Estate offered complexity, challenge, and uncharted emotional territory. Both paths held promise and peril. Morning found her still weighing impossible choices. She drifted downstairs to find the kitchen surprisingly busy, the boys helping. Mrs. Winters with pancake batter, while Ethan attempted to operate the coffee machine with limited success. Sarah. Oliver spotted her first. We're making breakfast. Dad said we could eat in the garden because it's Saturday. The simple domesticity of the scene tugged at her heart. This makeshift family they had inadvertently formed, complicated and messy, and unexpectedly right. "Mom," Laura called from the doorway, face alight with excitement. "Ethan Jr. says they have a treehouse. Can we play there after breakfast?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Jen from Chicago, no doubt calling for her final decision. She let it go to voicemail, suddenly certain in a way she hadn't been just moments before. "Let's have breakfast first," she said, moving into the kitchen's controlled chaos. "Then we'll talk about the treehouse." Ethan watched her, understanding dawning in his eyes as she set her phone aside. No words were necessary. Her choice was made. Whatever challenges Victoria might still pose, whatever adjustments their unconventional family would require, Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that she had found where she and Laura belonged. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Victoria's influence remained substantial, the wounds of the past still fragile, and the complexity of blending their lives would demand patience and courage. But as Sarah joined the children at the counter, accepting the mug of coffee Ethan placed in her hands, their fingers brushing in silent acknowledgement, she knew that some risks were worth taking. 3 broken boys, a grieving father, a single, mother and her daughter, separate pieces of shattered lives now forming something new and stronger at the broken places. Not perfect, not without challenges, but together. "Mom," Laura whispered, tugging at her sleeve, "are we staying? For real?" Sarah glanced at Ethan, who waited for her answer with carefully contained hope, then at the boys, who had paused in their pancake preparations to hear her response. "Yes," she said simply. "We're staying." Alexander's rare smile bloomed like sunshine after storm clouds. Oliver relaxed visibly, as if a weight had lifted from his small shoulders. Ethan Jr. pumped his fist in triumphant celebration. And Ethan. Ethan looked at her, with a promise in his eyes that made the future seem bright with possibility. Outside, beyond the shelter of Burton Estate, challenges awaited. Victoria's continued opposition, public scrutiny, the complex logistics of merging 2 families. But within these walls, healing had taken root, transforming a house of silence and grief into a home where laughter echoed and new memories could grow alongside honored remembrances of the past. In the months and years to come, there would be difficult conversations, legal battles, moments of doubt. But as Sarah accepted the slightly misshapen pancake Alexander proudly presented to her, she knew with unshakable certainty that they would face whatever came next together, not as perfect people, but as a family forged in adversity and bound by something stronger than convention or convenience. Love in all its complicated forms had found its way home. Dearest listeners, we hope you've been moved by Sarah and Ethan's journey of healing and redemption. For more emotionally captivating tales like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of stories that explore the complexity of blended families and unexpected love. Find it by clicking to your left. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that delve into life's most profound challenges and transformations. Don't miss our upcoming content. We'll be exploring more stories of healing, second chances, and families forming